My friend Isabella called me one evening before dinner. She was sobbing as she told me that she and her husband Enrique were getting a divorce. He had moved out of the house earlier that day and Isabella was distraught. I called my husband, who was on a business trip in Chicago, and he agreed that I should go stay with Isabella for a few days to help her during this difficult time. I packed a small suitcase and got right into the car. It was late, and it would take me at least 4 hours to drive from my home to Santa Fe. Isabella was expecting me to arrive around midnight. As I traveled down the dark, wet highway, I kept feeling chills, as if someone or something were watching me. I kept looking in the rearview mirror and glancing into the back seat. No one was there. Don't be ridiculous, I told myself, wishing fervently that I was home in bed instead of driving on a dark, rainy highway. There was almost no traffic, and I really wished that I would soon reach Santa Fe. I turned off the highway just before I reached the city and started down the side roads that led to Isabella's house. As I approached the small crossroads, I saw a woman step into the street directly in front of my car. I shrieked in fright and slammed on my brakes, praying I would miss her. The car shuddered to a halt, and I looked frantically around for the woman. Then I saw her, right beside my window, looking at me. She had the face of a demon, twisted eyes glowing red, and short pointed teeth. I screamed as she leaped at my window, her clawed hand striking the glass. I put my foot down on the accelerator and the car leaped forward. For a few terrible moments, she ran alongside the car, keeping up easily and striking at me again and again. Then she fell behind, and in the rearview mirror, I saw her growing taller and taller until she was as large as a tree. A red light swirled around her like mist, and she pointed after me. Her mouth moving, though I could not make out the words. I jerked my attention back to the road, afraid what might happen to me if my car ran off the street. I made it to Isabella's house in a record time and flung myself out the car, pounding on her door frantically and looking behind me to see if the demon-faced woman had followed me. Isabella came running to the door and let me in. "Shut the door, shut it!" I cried frantically, brushing past her into the safety of the house. "Jane, what's wrong?" she asked, slamming the door shut. She grabbed my hand and led me into the living room. I sank onto the couch and started sobbing in fear and reaction. After several minutes, I managed to gasp out my story. Isabella gasped and said, "Are you sure you were at the crossroads when you saw her?" I nodded, puzzled by her question. "It must have been la mala hora," Isabella said, wringing her hands. "The bad hour?" I asked. "This is bad, Jane, very bad," Isabella cried. "La mala hora only appears at crossroads when someone is going to die." Ordinarily, I would have laughed at such a superstition, but the appearance of the demon woman had shaken me. Isabella got me a cup of hot cocoa, brought my luggage in from my car, and sent me to bed. She was so concerned for me that she didn't once mention the divorce or Enrique. I felt much better the next morning, but I could not shake the feeling of dread that grew within me all day. Neither of us mentioned la mala hora, but we were both thinking of her when I told Isabella that I wanted to go home. Isabella insisted on accompanying me. I flatly refused to drive after dark. I was afraid I would see the demon woman again when I passed the crossroads. We left the next morning, and we hadn't been home more than 20 minutes when a police car pulled into my driveway. I knew at once what it meant, and so did Isabella. The officer spoke very gently to me, but nothing could soften the news. My husband had been mugged on the way back to his hotel after dinner last night. His body had not been found until this morning. he had been shot in the head and was killed instantly. "Go straight to the store and don't fool around," his mother said sternly as she handed over the money. "Your father's boss is coming to dinner tonight and we're having his favorite meal of liver and onions. It is important that we make a good impression, so get the best liver they've got," she said. "I will, Ma," Tommy sulked. His mother had really been after him since he brought home a failing report card. Tommy grabbed his bicycle from the garage and rode down the street, then saw his friend Chad. "Come on, Tommy," Chad called. "The gang's playing baseball over at the park, and we need a pitcher." Immediately, all thoughts of his errand fled from Tommy's mind. The boys headed towards the park. Tommy pitched a no-hitter to win the game for his team, but by the time it was over, it was dark. Then Tommy remembered his errand. "The liver!" he gasped. "I've got to get to the store." But all the local groceries were closed. "My mom is going to kill me," he gasped. First the bad report card, and now this. He would be grounded for life. As he rode home past the cemetery, he got an idea. It was an awful idea, but it would save him from the even more awful fate that awaited him if he came home without a liver. His great-uncle had died a few days ago and had been buried in the cemetery. What harm would it be to remove it? His uncle certainly didn't need it anymore. Tommy hurried home as silently as he could and got his father's shovel. He returned to the cemetery and began digging up his great-uncle's grave. That night, his mother cooked up the liver and onions, and the boss raved about the meal and had such a good time that he didn't even leave until quite late. Tommy went to bed that night relieved he had gotten away with it. He fell asleep almost as soon as his head hit the pillow, but woke up with a start soon after, sure that he had heard a voice. "Where's my liver?" A ghost voice rose up from the staircase, deep and guttural. Tommy gasped in fear and flung himself under the covers as the thud of heavy footsteps reached the top of the steps. Thump, thump, thump. The footsteps drew nearer until they reached Tommy's door. "Who's got my liver?" the horrible voice asked again. "Go away, go away," Tommy whispered repeatedly. His whole body trembled in terror as once more the voice asked, "Where's my liver? Who's got my liver?" Sheer terror made him suddenly bold. Tommy threw back the covers and found the shriveled white face of his great-uncle right above him. "We ate your liver," he shouted. "I know you did, Tommy," the rotting corpse of his great-uncle said softly, stretching out his bony hands towards the boy's shaking body. Tommy screamed. The next morning, Tommy's parents discovered their son lying dead on top of his bed. His liver had been ripped right out of his body, but the autopsy proved that the boy had already died of fright before his liver was removed.